So welcome everyone. My name is Talita. I am a program manager at Open Doors, and we're going to be discussing some practical tips and what to include and not include in your CV. Just before we get started, I just want to cover just some housekeeping. So my colleague Jazz is here today helping us out. So if I have any trouble, I might call her to give us a hand. But in general, I just wanted to know that the session is being recorded. No one's faces or anything like that is being recorded. But in case you end up asking questions at the end or anything like that, your voice might be in the recording. We have closed captions enabled. So if you want to turn that on, it's probably under the three dots button that's below your screen. And then you would have the CC option to turn that on. That means you're going to have closed captions. It's not perfect, but it is helpful. You might have, if you want to increase the font in that, there is a closed caption settings next to it. So you can go there and make the font bigger if you'd like. The chat is disabled, so you won't be able to use it on this webinar, but you can use the Q&A feature. So if you have any questions, you can type that into the Q&A. And as soon as I have some time, I'll take a look at them and I can answer them here, or Jess might take them over and answer them on the Q&A itself in writing. We will have time for questions at the end. So if you want to actually voice your question and talk to us, you can just use the raise hand function. And I will unmute you and you can talk to us and we can have a conversation at the end. Okay. So I'm just going to share my screen before we get started. So hopefully everyone can see that. If they can't, let me know somehow on the Q&A, or Jess can let me know. So again, welcome everyone. Just to let you know what we're going to be covering today. There you go. The agenda for today is, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Open Doors initiative in case you haven't worked with us before. Then we're going to talk about the CV layout. So what sections should be in your CV in Ireland. And I'm going to give you very practical examples of how to build a CV from scratch or how to improve your current CV in a way that makes sense here in Ireland. And I'm going to give you examples of what to include and what not to include. Then we're going to talk about CV presentation, so how you should present your CV. And we're going to talk about some practical tips and tools, free tools that you can use to just cut down on the time that you spend on your CV, but also that will, improve your effectiveness of getting responses. I'm also just going to mention that we do have a CV guide. So I'm just going to walk through some of the things that are included in the CV guide that we're not covering today. And don't worry, because you're all going to get the CV guide and our CV template via email after this webinar. And we will have some time at the end for Q&A. If you don't get a chance to ask your question today, don't worry. I'm going to leave my email up here and you can just get in touch and we'll schedule a call, or if it's a short query, we can just exchange a couple of emails and hopefully we'll be able to help. So like I said, just to give you some context about Open Doors, we are a group of over 115 companies and nonprofits, and we work with the government to create pathways to further education, employment, and self-employment for marginalized groups in Ireland. So that could include, refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants, young people under 25 with educational barriers, people with a disability, people from the traveling community, LGBTQIA, so any group really that faces those additional barriers to employment. We offer many types of support, so this workshop is one of them, and we have many other types of webinars and workshops, both online and in person, but we also have a mentorship program where you receive individual support from 3 to 6 months from an experienced mentor. We are members, so we're corporate members like HubSpot, Salesforce, Microsoft, companies that are hiring, post jobs on our website that we can help you link you into them and prepare your application. We organize events like recruitment events where our participants have been very successful at getting jobs. And we provide direct support. We're launching a business English course. So it's an on-demand English course where you can watch the course whenever you want. We only have about 50 spots at the moment, but we're announcing it this week. So if you are interested, you can let us know. We will have 4 kind of training sessions throughout the course, but most of it is, whenever you're free and you have the time to take the course, you can do it in your own time. If you're interested, you should follow us on social media because we'll be posting about it later this week. So starting with the CV layout, these are the kind of key sections that you usually need to have in your CV in Ireland. Obviously, this can change a little bit depending on the industry you work in, but I'm going to give you kind of general guidelines of how to build a CV. So you'd start with your personal information, then you go into your personal statement and include highlights. So a lot of people don't do that, but we're going to cover this. Go through your work experience. Usually I suggest doing that before your education, which is not super intuitive to people. Some people will put education first because chronologically it makes sense. However, there is one strong argument for putting work experience at the top, which is a recruiter sometimes will only spend a few seconds on your CV. So for them to quickly see that you are experienced, that you have had similar jobs in the past, will kind of get them to keep reading. While if your work experience is only on the second page, they might not even get there. So it's important to always put the most relevant information up first. Then after education, so education would be your degrees, skills and training would be any other short courses, any other relevant skills that you didn't have, the space to include in your highlights. Then hobbies and interests, we're going to cover that later, achievements and references. So starting with personal information. One of the key mistakes that people make, especially when they're from another country, is including a picture of yourself and including personal information like marital status, gender, age, and how many children you have. So this is not only not expected in Ireland, but it's you shouldn't do that because of discrimination laws. Usually the employer doesn't even want you to know that. At this stage in the process and in any other stage really. So you shouldn't include any of this information. Another key thing that happens is a lot of people will use an email, like a personal email that they've had forever, and sometimes it doesn't look very professional. So for example, I love basketball 123 is not a very professional email. So if you have an email like that, that's no problem. You can keep using that, but maybe create a separate Gmail, for example, which is free, specifically for job seeking purposes. Make sure to use your first name, last name, and obviously if that's taken, you can use a different combination, include numbers. That's absolutely fine. Just make sure to keep it a little bit more professional. So what you should have in your personal information is your full name, your email address, your phone number. Make sure these are correct because the recruiter is going to want to contact you to call you for an interview. And if they're not correct, they will probably just give up. They're not going to figure out, where you live or your social media to try and find you. So make sure there aren't any typos here. Include your LinkedIn profile if you have one, and if it's up to date and well built. Include a portfolio if that's relevant. If you're a designer or a software developer or anything like that, make sure to include that. And include, if you're not from Ireland, include the sentence eligible to work in Ireland full-time or part-time, whatever it is that you're eligible to do. This is very important. A lot of people will put in, their visa type, their stamp, so stamp 2, 3, 4. And bigger companies will know what that means, but smaller companies might not. So including eligible to work in Ireland full-time, for example, is very important so that the person doesn't, look, this person has a stamp 4. What does that mean? I'm not going to waste my time looking it up. So it might mean that, you know, they'll need a visa sponsorship or something. So I might just ignore your CV. So just make their life easier and let them know that you are eligible to work full-time or part-time, or that, you know, you're getting your work permit soon, or whatever is your situation. Just let them know to address those biases. So here's an example. So this isn't actually what I do. I just use this as an example, but this could be my CV if I worked in marketing. So you would have my full name, Talita Holzer, you have my phone number, my email address, a link to my LinkedIn profile. Make sure you use a short URL for your LinkedIn profile. If you don't know how to do that, you can email me and I can teach you how. But you can change that link there. So it's linkedin.com/your name or something short, and that makes sense. Then I suggest including job titles. This isn't mandatory, but I do think it helps. The first job title should always be the job that you're applying for. So if I'm applying for an account executive role, that's the first job title that I'm going to have under my name. This immediately makes the recruiter think this person is capable of doing the job, because that's how they describe themselves. And then I suggest adding maybe 1 or 2 other job titles that are relevant to the role, but that can show that you are able to do other things. So that can be, you know, previous job titles that you've had, but that include, that kind of show that information that you have the skills and the background to perform the tasks on the job description. So when it comes to address, this is a huge question that people ask. Should I include my, you know, my home address as part of my personal information in my CV? My answer is that it depends, unfortunately. So what I would say is that if you're close to the company, you know, in the same city or even in the same county, or it's easily accessible by public transport, or if you own a car or whatever it is that, you know, it's going to be easy for you to get there, you should include it. If you're far away from the company and like planning to move or something like that, I wouldn't include it, because some people might just look at it and think this person is 3 hours from here. Why are they even applying for the job? And they might just ignore your CV. And you don't want to be rejected for something small like that. If you're applying, obviously, you know, you have a plan for how to work at that company. So don't give them, you know, a reason to reject you for something silly like this. So I would remove it, and then you can address this during the interview process and say, look, I live far away, but I'm planning to move, or, you know, it's a hybrid work and I'm happy to come into the office a couple of days a week or something like that. Then you come into your personal statement, and this is often kind of overlooked by job seekers. People tend to write like a generic statement, and in my personal opinion, this is the most important thing in your CV. It's the first thing that the recruiter is going to read, and is when they're going to form their first opinion of you. If they have, you know, a problem in their mind that they're looking to solve by hiring someone, and this is your kind of like elevator pitch. This is your 3 sentences to let them know, I am capable, I'm going to be the one to solve this problem. So make sure to spend some time on this and make it, you know, shine, and tailor this to every job that you apply for. So don't make this very long, no more than 2 or 3 sentences, I would say. Don't add generic sentences and cliches. Don't include motivations here. Like a common thing that I see all the time is people looking for a role as an account manager in a company like yours. That's fine, but it's also very obvious. You wouldn't be applying for the job if you weren't looking for a job like that in that company. So you're kind of just wasting precious space by doing that. So what I would suggest, instead of saying, you know, looking for opportunity in whatever, is focus on your skills, your experience that is relevant to the job, very specific to the job. So make sure to look at the skills, the requirements of the job description, and look at your past, at your background, at the skills that you do have, and make sure those are there highlighted in the personal statement. Explain why you're the best person for that specific role, and list those relevant experiences and skills if possible. So here are just a few examples of things that I see on almost every CV that we get. Highly motivated professional, strong team player, works well under pressure, results driven, and goal oriented. I'm willing to bet that if you have a CV, you probably have one of those in your personal statement or somewhere in your CV. And those don't really mean much to the person reading. Unfortunately, most people will have those, so it doesn't actually make you stand out. So what I would recommend is, instead of saying that, make sure that you show that on your personal statement instead of just saying it. So you could say, I have over 6 years of experience as an account manager. So that quickly says, I've done this work before, I know how to do it. I'm well versed in managing social media accounts for large banks. I'm saying this because it was in the job description. If they hadn't mentioned large banks, there's no reason for me to mention large banks here. So find whatever you have in your experience that is very relevant to the job description. Achieving 25% increase in conversion rates. So this is a metric that shows that I'm results driven and I'm goal oriented because I'm mentioning it without me having to say that. So here, and then after the personal statement, I recommend that you put in highlights. So what is that? It's basically a list of your core skills, but that are extremely relevant to that job and that you want to highlight as part of your personal statement. It can be also achievements as long as they're relevant. You're going to have space to talk about your skills and talk about your training at another section that's going to come after. But in here, I'm talking about basically the skills that they mention on the job description as being, requirements for this job and that you do have. That's what you need to highlight here. So don't write a long list of generic skills without real meaning. And don't include skills and accomplishments without any context. So what we recommend you do is that you choose 4 to 5 core competencies. So those are relevant skills and accomplishments. Use bullet points and include an example to illustrate the skills. So what do I mean by that? Instead of writing team player, excellent communicator, problem solver, excellent in organization and time management, proficient in the office packages. Instead of saying all of that, which is literally on most of CVs everywhere, you can say teamwork, member of a 20-person team that delivered exceptional results on time and under budget 100% of the time. Do you see how that's different? You're actually illustrating why you're a team player without having to say that you're a team player. You're showing that you're capable of working in a large team, and you're still results oriented, goal focused, and you were able to deliver all of that, 100% of the time under budget. So this is showing a lot with just one sentence, and it's not going to occupy, a lot of space in your CV, because you're going to use one line anyway to write team player, and another to write results driven, and another to write goal oriented. So instead of saying that, write one sentence that, highlights how you've used those skills and those characteristics you have before. So this is an example. I'm not going to read everything because we don't have time, but you will get these slides after this webinar, so you can go through this example in detail. But it's basically showing you how your profile or personal statement section would look like. So you can have, a couple of sentences at the beginning highlighting your experience, your skills, and that are relevant, like I said, to the job description. So for example, the last sentence there, experienced in creating marketing materials for global teams, including presentations, infographics, and KPI reports. I took that word for word from a job description. That's what I would do. If I'm applying for a role that has, a job description, which all jobs should have, you can take parts of the job description that are the most relevant to your skills and experience and include that there. And then I have 4 highlights here: social media management, teamwork, event management, and customer service. If on the job description there was no mention of events, this isn't a highlight I'm going to put here. I'm going to choose another skill that is more relevant. So the next section is the work experience. So one mistake that people make is just, writing a long list of companies with not a lot of context. People don't pay a lot of attention to formatting here. So, the different work experiences have just different formatting, which just makes the reader think that you're not, paying attention to detail, which in some cases is not that important, but in some jobs it could be very important. So especially if you're applying for work that you need to, for example, be a great communicator and write documents or write, social media posts or whatever it is. If you're going to have to communicate effectively, especially in writing, this is something that you have to pay attention in your CV because it's going to reflect that. Another thing that most people do is they list their tasks and responsibilities for each job, but they don't talk at all about results. And this is important. This shows that you're results oriented. This shows that you care about results to the company, which, every company wants employees that care about results. So if you can include numbers on basically every bullet point, you should. So make sure to start with your most recent work experience first. There are exceptions. So if you are applying for a job that you had, an experience that was very relevant to that job before your last experience, you might want to start with that one. And there are ways to just format this in a way that makes sense. You can kind of divide that section in two and have a section that is like relevant experience, and you have one or two or how many experiences you had before, and then you start all the other experiences in chronological order. So there are other ways of doing it, but in general, you would start just with the most recent first and work backwards. Pay attention to formatting. Describe the company in like one line. Even if it is a big company that's well known, you never know. The person might not know exactly what they do. So it's interesting to just describe what the company does and, your general role in that company. But if you are, for example, if you worked in a massive company from your home country in like Somalia, that might be a massive company there and it might not be well known in Ireland. So I recommend that you say, it's this company was the biggest network provider in the continent or whatever. So make sure to just include that. Include the results, number, like I said, include dates. So that's month and year that you started and finished at every work experience. So that's something that some people just put year, and that's not enough because the person reading it wants to know how long you were there. They want to see if there are any gaps or any overlap. So it is important that you add that information. And focus on relevant information. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make with their CV is that they're proud of their work, which is good, but that means that they want to list everything that they've done during their time at a certain company. And a lot of it is not relevant to the job you're applying for. So the advice here is to have a master CV, have one CV that has everything that you've ever done, all the tasks, all the results, all the responsibilities that you can think of. But then you cut half of it out when you actually apply for a job. You choose the top 5 or 6 that actually make sense for that role. So here's an example. So for example, I can say that from June 2018 to up until now, I am an account manager at company XYZ in Dublin, Ireland. So a couple of things that are important here. Account manager is my job title. It's in bold. It's very easy for the person to understand this is a new work experience that I'm starting to read. If everything is, exactly the same formatting, it's difficult for the person to understand, this is actually a different work experience that this person had. So start with your job title in bold, have the name of the company below, include the city and the country. That's important, especially if your experience is in Ireland. So if you're a migrant, if you've been here for a while, and even if you did some volunteer work, it doesn't have to be paid work necessarily, but include that there because having local experience is very important for companies. And if you don't have that experience, I suggest you go and try and get it. So if you do have some time and you can do a little bit of volunteering work, for example, that's a way to quickly get some local experience, get a reference as well that is local, so it can really help you out. So you can see the next step is to describe the company. So, and what you did there. So I built effective working relationships with key large clients for a SaaS company. So that's software as a service with over 1 million monthly turnover. Why did I say that? To give the person an idea of how big it is, because otherwise they might just assume that it's a small company, and it's not a problem if it is a small company, but just describe what it does. So the person understands what was happening and what were your responsibilities there. So let's say it was a small company. You can actually say responsible for, marketing, admin, and sales functions within this company, which grew 100% in 2 years. Like you can include more information, include numbers, metrics to show how important your work was for that company, regardless of the size. And then you have there 4 bullet points describing, what I actually did and what I actually achieved. So you'll see that, for example, I didn't just say that I developed and managed the company's revenue. I said that, I grew the company's revenue by 30%. So there is a metric there. It shows that I'm, results oriented, that I'm focused on results, and that I'll do the same for this person's company as well. So here's just a tip, because I think it's a bit overwhelming to write work experiences, especially if they're kind of old, you haven't actually worked in a company for a few years, and you're writing your responsibilities and your achievements from scratch. So what I would suggest is that you start by going on LinkedIn or Indeed or any other job searching tool, and type in the name of your job title. So for example, if I was an account manager at a company 10 years ago, and I want to describe what I used to do, I don't remember exactly what it was, or I find it just difficult to describe what I did, I can go on LinkedIn, type in account manager, look for a job that was similar, and look at those responsibilities and say, okay, build effective working relationships with key clients. Yes, I did that. So I'll copy and paste that. Develop, manage, and grow Havoc SDK revenue. I don't know what that is, so I didn't do that. So I'll skip that one. Engage with customers and partners on site and at industry events. Yes, I did do that. So I'll go and copy and paste. So that's how you start building that list in a way that is, using industry lingo, because you're not getting it from your head, you're actually getting it from companies that are looking for people to do exactly that. Just make sure that you're not, including things that you haven't actually done. And then the second tip is that you can use, there are quite a few tools out there, but what I'm recommending today is ChatGPT, which is a very new AI tool. It's a chatbot basically that helps you do a range of things, but one of the things you can use it for is to actually build your CV. So you can ask the chat to add metrics to your work experience. So once you have that list of, responsibilities, you can literally go on ChatGPT and say, can you add metrics to this? And then you paste all of your responsibilities, and it will send it back to you with suggestions for, metrics that you could include. So this is a real example. I did this yesterday. So I copied and pasted some responsibilities from my own job description when I applied for this job. So the first one, for example, is leading the development and implementation of Pathways to Progress at the Open Doors Initiative. So what kind of metrics could I associate with that? I'm not sure. So I asked ChatGPT, and it came back to me saying, leading the development and implementation of Pathways to Progress at the Open Doors Initiative, resulting in an increase in program participation of 20% per year. Obviously, that number is not correct, but at least now I have an example of what I can include here, and then I can just go and change that number. If that doesn't make sense for me, which it wouldn't in this case, because the program wasn't running 100% yet when I joined, so it wouldn't make sense for me to say that. So I can just go to ChatGPT and say, can you give me another example for the first bullet point? And it will give me another example. And then I can keep doing that until I get to a metric that I'm comfortable with and that I know how to represent it. And I can do that for every bullet point. And I know it sounds like it's going to take a while, and it will the first time, but once you've done it once for your master CV, adapting that to each job you apply for, it's going to take literally a couple of minutes, and it's going to seem like you spent hours tailoring your CV to that specific job. So I promise it's going to work a lot better than sending, the same CV to every job. So the next section is education. So don't include training and short courses here. This belongs in the next section. Don't include your secondary education unless it's somewhat recent, or if you don't have like a bachelor's degree, for example. Don't include a lot of information here, like a long list. If you have 3 or 4 master's degree, maybe you should choose 1 or 2 that are more relevant, unless all of them are relevant. Or if they're looking for like an academic position, of course, then it makes more sense. But if not, your CV has valuable space that should be more focused on other things like your actual experience and skills. So I would recommend just choosing a couple of more relevant education here. And don't include too much information about each course because people are not going to be that interested. You should include modules, especially if you're, for example, if you graduated in a university outside of Ireland, and the course has, for example, a different name than the course here in Ireland. So, for example, media studies somewhere might be called something else here. So make sure that you include a couple of modules there to show to the person reading, look, I actually know about all of these topics because I completed this qualification. Include the title of your qualification, the organization that provided it, dates. It could be just year here, but if you know the month, might as well. Like I said, you may list the main subjects or modules, and make sure to translate all the details. So, for example, if you went to the University of Barcelona, don't write that in Spanish, write that in English. The same for the name of the university, for the name of the course, the name of the modules, the subjects. Translate everything because people need to understand what you're saying. And in this case, it's pretty obvious, but it could not be, and if the person doesn't understand, they might just, it's another reason for them to reject you. And it's not really a good reason. So another tip of a tool that you can use, it's called NARIC. So it's a free tool, again, online, that it compares any major award type that you have, any qualification that you have with a major award type here in Ireland. And it also gives you the national framework level. So what does that mean? So I can come in here. So I'm originally from Brazil. So I can go and say my country is Brazil. My type of education is higher education. And then I click on search. And it gives me 9 qualifications from Brazil of higher education. And I'll go and search for mine. And I know exactly the translation, how that would be, written here in English inside of Ireland, and what's the NFQ level. So sometimes you're going to have a course, a qualification that doesn't translate directly to something here. So you might want to include the NFQ level so that people understand, oh, this is equivalent to a bachelor's degree or to a master's degree, for example, even if it isn't called a bachelor's degree. Then you'll have the section training and skills. This is pretty straightforward. Just include any additional training, short courses, and skills that are relevant to the job. You can include proficiency in programs, languages, certifications. If you're not from Ireland and if you're from a country that doesn't have English as the first language, I would include English up there on your highlights under your personal statement, especially if you have like advanced English, because this is, again, another bias that the recruiter might have. and they look at your name, they assume that because you're not from Ireland, you don't speak English well. And this is a quick way to say, no, actually, I don't. My English is fluent or advanced or whatever. So I speak it well enough to do this job. So I wouldn't put it here. I would put it there on the highlights, or you can even add it twice if it's very important to the role. You can include any other certifications that you have. You can include driving license if you have it, and what type. And then if you're including skills here, which you should follow the same kind of recipe as highlights. Include evidence and examples when possible. So I'm not going to go through that again because we've covered that during the highlights part of the personal statement. Then finally, you have hobbies and interests. If you can choose activities that are relevant to the job, that's better. You don't have to. The section is not going to be the one that is going to make a difference if you get through or not. This is more so that the recruiter and the hiring manager can have a bit of an idea of who you are outside of work. But if you can include examples that are relevant, that might, you might have developed some skills during that hobby, for example, that are relevant to the job, I think that could be helpful. And give concrete examples. So instead of saying I like music, you can say I love singing and have been part of a choir since 2013. It shows that you've been part of a group for years, that you have stability, that you've been able to manage your time well to keep doing that hobby, even though you've had a busy career. Like it just gives the person a bit more information. Instead of saying I enjoy writing, you can say you contribute to a food blog with over 500 monthly readers. Instead of saying I play football, you can say that you've managed a team for 2 years or something like that. It shows leadership skills. Obviously, that's not going to be relevant to everyone. Maybe you've just been playing football without managing any teams for years, and that's fine. Just include that bit of information. I've been playing it steadily with a group for 10 years or 5 years or 2 years or whatever it is. Then achievements, this is just tasks and activities that stand out. That can be prizes, awards, medals, memberships, publications, any media coverage, and special events that you've organized. If it's a really big achievement, I would put it on as part of your highlights. But if you have smaller things that you think are relevant to the job, you can include them here. References, it's not really expected that you name your references here on your CV or that you include any contact details. You can just say references provided upon request. That's what usually is done here in Ireland. You can say excellent references provided upon request as well if you do have really good references. And one tip here is that if your references are from abroad, I mentioned this before, try to gain a little bit of local experience. It can be volunteering, it can be, working with, I don't know, like a startup or a small company. Even if it is for a couple of months, just to have a local reference and local experience. So that's it about the layout of the CV. So now we get into presentation, which I promise is going to be quicker. So how you present your CV is very important. Like I said, especially for jobs that require, good writing skills or, that you just present neat formatting. Recruiters usually spend about 7 seconds on a CV before actually deciding if this person might be good for the job or not. So this is important. Make sure that you highlight the most important information first, that you have clear headings, use bold type, capital letters, even different colors, maybe not too many different colors, but maybe, like a dark blue or something is fine. And it can help the person quickly understand, this is a different section to this one. This is a different work experience to this one. Make sure to leave enough white space. If I get a CV that is extremely cluttered, so too much text and not enough white space, I immediately get put off and I don't feel like reading that because it doesn't seem like it's, going to be an enjoyable read. So make sure to, have spacing between your experiences, between your sections and everything. Use templates. They just make your life a lot easier. There are so many free templates online. We have one that I will share with you after this webinar. Indeed has a CV writing tool. So if you Google Indeed CV writing tool, you'll find it. It's very good. You can just type in, you basically answer questions and they format everything for you. LinkedIn also has a resume builder. So if you have a really good LinkedIn profile, you might want to use that one because it basically exports your LinkedIn profile into kind of a CV looking document. Keep it short and simple, usually 2 pages. It's not a very strict rule. Sometimes you can have a longer CV, you can have a shorter CV, but rule of thumb is 2 pages. Remove any details that are not relevant to the job. I've talked about this, and make it easy for people to find information. Think about it from the perspective of the person who will be reading it. What do they want to know? Put that at the top. If they're looking for an account manager with experience, have that at the top, at your personal statement, at your highlights, as your first experience. Don't bury that information because it's just going to work against you. So getting into some tips and tools. First tip, and if you're leaving with one learning from today, is customize your CV. This is very important. Most people don't do that. Most people send almost the same CV to every company and every job they apply for. And this tends to work against them. So you should really write a unique CV to each position you apply for. And that sounds like you're going to spend, hours working on your CV for each position, and that's going to be extremely, time consuming. But I promise you, once you get the hang of it, and if you use some of these tools that we're recommending, it won't take nearly as long. And it will create more opportunities for you. If you tailor your CV to a job, I promise you, you will get more callbacks than if you don't. If you're in a hurry and you don't have time to update your whole CV, update at least your personal statement so it matches the job description. Base your CV on the job description, like I said. So look closely at their responsibilities, the skills, the qualifications that they require, and make sure that everything that you can check there is very easy to find on your CV. And prove that you can solve the problem of the hiring manager. So usually when a company is hiring someone is because they have a problem that they need solved. And you can easily figure out what that problem is from the job description. When you describe a job, you're describing what you want someone to do that is not currently, being done properly. So you can come in and say, I've done this for this amount of time. I know how to do it. I'm well versed or extremely experienced or, very qualified, whatever the word you want to use, in doing exactly that you want this new person to do. That's how you're going to convince the person to call you for an interview. So another tip is to use Jobalytics. So this is a free tool. It's a Chrome extension. So the way it works is you download it. It's going to be like a little button on your Chrome browser. If you don't use Chrome, you can just download Chrome for this. It might have an extension for other browsers, but I've used it for Chrome. So how does this work? So if you're looking for a job on LinkedIn, what it's going to do is you upload your CV to Jobalytics. And then when you click the little button on the Chrome browser, it's going to compare your CV to that job description that you have open in front of you. And it's going to tell you, these are the keywords that you have on your CV, great, and these are the ones that are missing. So this will give you a really good indication of what is missing in your CV that you should add. Obviously, only add it if you actually have that skill. But if you don't, you could address that. So let's say, for example, that I'm a software developer and that it's asking for a specific programming language that I don't have. Instead of me going and lying on my CV and saying that I do have it, what I'll do is I'll maybe write on my highlights, I have learned 5 different programming languages in the short period of 2 years while working for XYZ company. And I can easily pick up new languages, including whatever the languages that is in the job description and I don't have. This is going to address that issue quickly because the person is going to be looking for that. They're not going to find it, but then they're going to see, this person actually mentioned they, in a couple of weeks, they're probably going to be able to pick this up. So I'm not worried about it. So, and you can do that for any skill. For sales, for example, if you haven't actually worked in sales, but you can say that you've worked in other customer facing roles. So you're very good at, convincing people and persuading people to do certain things, or, solving problems, whatever it is, whatever transferable skills that you have, that means that you're going to learn that quickly. Again, I'm going to go back to ChatGPT because I think it's an amazing tool, but you can use it specifically to customize your CV, which is our biggest tip of this webinar. Customize your CV. So, and you can use ChatGPT to do that. You can literally, so I went there and I said, write me a personal statement for this job. These are the skills I want to highlight. And then it wrote it for me. And then I wrote back, include that I have organized events, include metrics. And then it did that. You can see in the middle here, it says organize more than 30 events with an average attendance of 200 people, resulting in a 70% success rate for participants. Obviously, those numbers are not true. I'm going to have to adapt them. But now I know how to write this in a way that makes sense and it sounds formal. And you can write back to the bot saying, make this more formal, make this shorter, add more numbers. You can ask it to do basically anything you want to make it sound better to you. And once you get to, a few sentences that you're happy with, there you go. You have a personal statement. Then you can ask it to, create bullet points for your highlights. Then you can ask it to create your first work experience, and you keep feeding it, information, and it will create it for you. So it's an extremely powerful tool that I highly recommend that you use. Another tip is check for errors, use a spell checker, set the spell checker to British English. So a lot of people will use American English, and then some words are just not gonna be correct here in Ireland. You can use the one in Word, or you can use something like Grammarly, the free version. So all of those will work just as fine. Ask someone to double check everything. We do CV reviews. If you want to send me your CV, I'm happy to take a look at it. If you have a friend, if you have someone who can take a quick look at it, I highly recommend you do that, because sometimes, we've just been looking at something for so long that we don't realize there's a typo or a mistake there. Check for spelling mistakes, check for typos, check for dates that conflict with one another. And like I said, check that your email address and phone number is correct, because if the recruiter can't reach you, you're going to lose an opportunity there. A couple of other tips, and I'll cover these quickly because we're running out of time. But like I said, have a master CV that has everything that you've ever done, all of your responsibilities, all of your results, everything you can think of, a bunch of different metrics, everything. And then you'll be able to quickly adapt that to each job and just keep all the relevant stuff. Keep updating your CV even when you're employed. So a lot of people wait until they want to switch jobs, or if they're unemployed, to actually update their CV. And that's not a good way of doing it, because if you spend, let's say 5 years in the same company, you're not going to remember what you were doing 4 years ago. You're not going to remember your key achievements. You're not going to remember, the metrics that you had. So it's good to keep updating that monthly if possible. Don't reply too soon. That's particularly important for like a LinkedIn post. So if there's a job on LinkedIn, you know how there's a button like apply now. Be careful with that, because if I'm a company and I put up a job and I start getting applications within like 30 seconds, it looks to me that you didn't even read the job description, that you're just applying anywhere, everywhere, just to get any job. And that is fine, but it also doesn't convince the company that you want to work in that specific company, which is usually, something that people appreciate. Make sure to read the application requirements and instructions. So if there are instructions for how to submit your CV, for example, make sure to follow them. If they tell you to name the file a certain thing, name the file that certain thing. If they want you to put your cover letter with your CV in the same document, make sure to do that. Those are very small things. And sometimes if you don't do that, you just think, oh, it's not important, but it is. The recruiter is, like I said, the job market is it's crazy right now. There's a lot of people applying for jobs, and any job right now, like, people are getting hundreds of applications. So don't give them any reason to reject you. Always send a cover letter, even if they don't ask for one. You can use, there are many free tools to write cover letters. Indeed has, if you type in Indeed a cover letter sample on Google, you're going to find a website that has different cover letters for each kind of industry and job title. So you can find one exactly for the job title, the job you're applying for. You can copy and paste it, and you can just change, the metrics and change your experience a little bit. And you can, again, use the Chat GPT to do that. You can send it to Chat GPT and say, can you change this to have this experience and these metrics and, these results. So it's an easy way to do it. You can do it probably in a few minutes once you get the hang of it. And I promise you, it's going to help. It's going to make you stand out. Find out something about the organization and include that in the cover letter if possible. If there's anything that you really like about them, look at their annual report, for example, look at their recent social media posts. If there was anything big that they did or anything that relates your own experience and interests, make sure to mention that. It just shows that you went, the extra mile and made that effort. This is more general in terms, it's not particularly about CVs, but it's generally a good advice for people looking for jobs. Keep track of your applications and job descriptions. The reason I say that is that sometimes you're going to apply for a job and you're going to hear back maybe a month later. And maybe the job description is no longer online. So you're going to hear back, you're going to be called for an interview at like LinkedIn. And then you're like, okay, I don't remember the job. I don't remember the job description. I don't remember what CV I sent. So I don't remember exactly what was on it. Or if it was an online application, I don't remember my answers. So that's going to make your life very difficult, because when you get to the interview, they're going to ask you questions about the information you submitted. So if you don't know that information exactly, you're not going to be able to prepare very well. So I recommend you have an Excel spreadsheet, very simple, with the name of the company, the date you applied, copy and paste the job description, copy and paste the answers to any questions that you submitted online, have a link or, the actual file of the CV you submitted, or copy and paste the text, whatever works for you. Just have all that information there for every job that you apply for. I know it sounds like, again, it's going to take a little while, but once you get the hang of it, it's going to be seconds that you can do this, and it's going to make your life a lot easier when you're called for an interview. And the last step here is just think of any biases that the reader might have. So my name's Talita, for example. It's not a common Irish name. If someone sees that on a CV, they might assume that I don't speak English very well. So I'm going to address that at the top there, fluent in English. If I don't know, if I studied somewhere else, they might think that I don't, understand the Irish culture or how to work well in an office in Ireland. So I'm going to put that local experience up at the top, or I'm going to write that as part of my personal statement, like well accustomed to the Irish culture, working culture, having worked in an office in Ireland for over 2 years, something like that. So think of any biases, think of any assumptions that people might make about you, and address them as early on your CV as possible. So very quickly, we have a CV guide. I'm going to send it to everyone. It was developed with those facing additional barriers in mind. So migrants, people with disabilities, people with any underrepresented groups. It will teach you basically what I discussed here today, but it's going to talk about how to structure your CV to follow Irish standards, how to address some of those biases, like I mentioned, and it has practical tips and examples beyond what was presented here. So I suggest you check it out. It has additional information that wasn't mentioned here today as well, like how to send your CV via email, how to disclose personal information if necessary, how to write a cover letter, how to address any work gaps that you might have, and other open door supports that you might want to avail of. There's also a CV clinic that's being run by a couple of our partners tomorrow. If anyone is interested in attending this is an in-person event tomorrow at 1 p.m. in Dublin 1. The requirements is that you have to have a CV completed, and you need to submit that. You need to register by submitting your CV. You can send it to me. I'm going to put up my email here. We only have 4 spots, so if you are attending, send it. If you want to attend, send it to me as soon as possible. You need to be able to communicate in English as well. And this is mostly for refugees and asylum seekers, okay? The schedule is at 1 p.m. They'll have just a welcome session, networking session. At 2 p.m. they'll run through some CV tips and have a Q&A session. And at 3 p.m. you get an individual session with a consultant to talk about your CV specifically. Are there any questions? I know we don't have too much time, but hopefully we'll have time to answer a couple of questions. And here is my email, talita@opendoorsinitiative.ie, and our social media handles. Jess, I don't know if there are any questions. There aren't any questions on the Q&A. So if anyone wants to ask a question, there is, just one second. Said. I just,
Hi, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, so I just want to ask you about the part where you where you mentioned that we should clearly state our visa status. So it should be on our LinkedIn profile or it should be on our CV. That's what the part I was confused.
Clearly state what? Sorry.
Sorry, I just want to ask you that you mentioned of putting your visa status, like on which stamp you are. So are we supposed to put it on our CV or on our LinkedIn profile?
So my recommendation is not that you actually put your visa status or your stamp. My recommendation is that you say that you're eligible to work in Ireland, if you are, full-time or part-time. And that can be in both your LinkedIn profile and in your CV. You can include your visa information, but you don't have to.
Okay, so I just missed the point that where we're supposed to put it, like on the top where we put our LinkedIn profile link. Okay, that's perfect. Just
so
one line.
So on your CV, okay. Yeah, on your CV below maybe your phone number, your email, you can just have eligible to work in Ireland full-time.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. Anyone else? You can just use the raise hand function and I'll know to unmute you. Owen, I just unmuted you.
I'm just wondering, what would you do for, like, if you put down for work experience if you're just out of college?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So if you're applying for a role that doesn't require that you have much work experience, you don't need that section. If you've done any like volunteering or any special projects during college, you can include those. If not, you can just go straight into education, but then just make sure to include a bit more information about what you've learned in college, any special projects that you've done, to make sure that you have the skills to complete that, you know, to do that job.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Just one second. Patrick, I think I unmuted you.
Yeah, so I have a few questions. Okay, if you're applying for a job like data analysis, do you put down the data analysis title down on your CV?
Yeah, that's what I would recommend. I would always start with the job title that I'm applying for. because that just gives the recruiter like the notion that, look, this person can do that job.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, just making sure. Thanks.
Great. Good. Any other questions?
No, no, I don't think I have any other questions.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any other questions? I don't see any other hands up. Is there anything on the Q&A? No questions so far. Okay, so I think we're gonna wrap up then. If you do have any questions and you don't want to ask them now, or if you have any questions later in the day, just make sure to send me an email and I'll get in touch as soon as possible, and we can even work together on your CV if you'd like. So thanks everyone for attending today. And like I said, any questions, just feel free to send me an email or get in touch with anyone at the Open Doors team. Thanks everyone. Have a good rest of the day.